It's official. We're in season 2, which is all about starting. So in this first episode, I talk a lot about kind of like reiterating what I shared in one of my early episodes in season 1, which was about my family's entrepreneurial DNA. I grew up in an environment where I was exposed to a lot of people who started businesses, who started a lot of big projects, a lot of undertakings, and it was such a good influence for me, knowing that these things are possible. And I think that's what gave me a lot of courage to start my first business, which was a greeting card business, Pappy Cards. Yes, that was fun. And continuing to try my hand at business when I had no business experience, which is interesting. And how much that really helped me kind of figure things out and be, like I said, courageous about going ahead and starting business. Now, had I not been laid off my job, I may have never started this business. I kind of think that I would have started it because I love having my own business. Being a solopreneur is amazing. And it enables me to bring all of my skills to bear and just have that freedom that is so important to me. This season is going to be all about starting. I'm going to have guests. I'm going to be talking about the aspects of starting, especially the mindset stuff, which, like fear of failure, lack of capital, all the things that prevent us. I don't know enough. I don't have an MBA. That was one of mine. It's going to be a lot more prescriptive. I want you to understand that anything is possible when it comes to starting any project, whether it's a business or cleaning out your junk drawer, which to me was an overwhelming project in my life. But I took it on. I was brave. I went after that junk drawer and I cleaned that sucker out, and boy, is it organized now. Let's see how long it'll stay organized. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the episode and you enjoy season 2 of My Solopreneur Life. Welcome to My Solopreneur Life. I'm Terry Pappy, your gracious host, and I am so glad you're here. I have a wonderful episode for you. Sit back, relax, and let's have some real talk about what it is to be a solopreneur. So it's time to start a new season, and this season is all about starting, as I've already shared. And as I was thinking about this, and wondering, all right, how do I structure this so it's more prescriptive, that I bring on some guests? The vision I had for this show is evolving, obviously, but I wanted to get to the point where I had more guests, a little more texture in the content that I provided, as well as different perspectives and experiences, stories, because I love storytelling. And so this season, I am going to be doing that. I'm essentially bringing on guests. I'm going to be more prescriptive in the how-to of everything around starting. In my first season, I talked about my family's entrepreneurial DNA. And the more I thought about it in the context of starting a business or an endeavor or a project, I was like, wow, pretty much everybody in my family has had that experience. Today, I want to focus on what was my environmental influences around taking on a project, starting something, and finishing it, and deciding whether or not, well, maybe I shouldn't do that. And I have examples for all this stuff. Let me start by talking about my family. My dad started his fastener business, a company that was a distributorship outside of Philadelphia, where I grew up. And he started it with my uncle. And he and my uncle both worked for the same fastener company, and they were salesmen. That's what they got really good at, and they obviously got to know their product and the industry and the customers, and they decided to start their own business under their name and do similar work. They actually became a competitor. They started their own business, PM Fasteners, in rural Pennsylvania. They ended up being very successful. They worked out of a small location initially that they leased, and it had a warehouse, and they would purchase in bulk nuts and bolts, screws, washers, and all that stuff. And they would sell it to original equipment manufacturers like Black & Decker, Hurst gear shifts, General Electric, a lot of electronics back then. This is in the late 60s and 70s and through the 80s. The business is still there. Obviously, my dad has passed on, so has my uncle, and it's now run by the people that literally came up through the business. It was a family business, so it was kind of nice to have a company that my dad ran and get to be in that environment and exposed to that level of complexity and responsibility and ownership. He and my uncle both were very successful. They grew it to be one of the larger, if not the largest, fastener distributorship in the East Coast at one point. And it was just a great environment to grow up in, to be exposed to a family business. And yes, as a kid, I was pretty young when all that was going on. In fact, when he started the business, I was 6 years old. And when I think about, I wish he was here today so I could interview him about what his thought process was about starting. And very often people who are working in a business, I know this was true for me, they either experience a layoff, which catapults them into starting a business, or they just hit their max and they're like, you know what, I can do this so much better if I do it myself. Here's how I want to approach it, and this is what I want to do. Or they completely change careers and say, you know, I've been doing this work. It's not what I'm passionate about. I want to go and do something different. So there's a lot of impetus around why we would start something, especially a business. Now, obviously, they didn't start a solopreneur business, but I'm sharing this with you just to show you the environment that I was raised in and exposed to. And it wasn't just my dad and my uncle, it was also my siblings. It was also my in-law siblings. My brother, for example, he went and started working for my dad's company at one point, and he opened a branch of the business in Baltimore and was running that very successfully. And then he bought out that portion of the business and turned it into his own company and expanded that. He was very successful with that business, had multiple state branches, even had offices in Puerto Rico with clients there. So he did really well. Now, my nephew, his son Paul, also came up in the business, and he is now running the company. And what's interesting is when I actually talked to Paul this morning to just kind of get a refresher on how he got started working at his dad's company and what that was all about and what he's learned and how he's changed the business now that he's running it. And I thought it was a really interesting conversation, and I hope to have him on as a guest in a future episode in this season so he can talk more specifically. We always have such great conversations. But as he was talking to me, and obviously the current business is not a solopreneur business, just like my dad's company, PM Fasteners, is still alive and well in Pennsylvania. My brother's business, and now my nephew, his son's business, is alive and well in South Carolina. When I was talking to Paul, he was telling me some interesting facets around how he got started, and it really was out of desperation from the standpoint of he pretty much had no other options. So he had tried his hand at a lot of things. He was struggling with a lot of different directions as a young person out of college, and eventually came and said to his dad, let me work in the company. And he had some interesting remarks about having this kind of sense of entitlement, like, oh, my dad's got a company, I can just walk right in and take an executive position or something more than what he ended up with. And I said, well, how did you start? And he goes, with a with a scrub brush and rubber gloves in the bathroom cleaning toilets. He said, that's pretty much how I started. And he continued to say how it was such a good experience that he did start working in the business kind of from the ground up, because what it taught him was not only the function of the business, but he started learning about the application of what they were selling, the nuts and bolts and the expansion of how they were taking on different product lines, and how my brother really wanted to diversify the business, but he wasn't really sure how. And so Paul obviously moved out of the bathrooms and into the warehouse, and he started working on packaging and just learning about the fasteners, what the orders were about, how certain fasteners were being applied by their customers, and just really getting an understanding of how the business worked and how the supply chain of what they were an important part of was functioning in the overall business stream. It was interesting to hear him talk about that. And then eventually he came up from the warehouse and he started working on customer relationships and accounts, understanding that, just really learning how customers thought, acted, what they ordered, how they had conversations. And he shared a nugget of information that always stuck with him about really understanding the desire to serve the customer is what drives the products. And, me being in branding and marketing, it's all about picking your lane and what is your brand about and everything. But people who get into this more focused, like, oh, I only sell this, like I only do this type of work. Well, that doesn't really feel like it has a sustainability factor when you're not evolving with the marketplace. He now runs this business with a key focus on the customer, what their needs are, and he's actually expanded, adapted, and shifted the product lines that he carries based on what his customers really need. So when I talked to him, I was and through many, he's my nephew, so of course I'm going to have a lot of really great conversations with him. But what I know of him, he is so adamant about customer relationships and working with a customer and what their goals are in such a way where it's a true partnership. And that's difficult for a company that provides a service, a vendor, which is how the company who's hiring that vendor to supply them with a service or a product looks upon them. And because it's not internal, it's outsourced. That's a big stigma and challenge for many outsourced providers to do that. That being said, he was able to create a brand for himself that was based on his commitment, how he acted in the marketplace, how he sold, how he deepened relationships. So his business grew through referral, through just him being about the customer. So for me, looking at what my nephew has been able to do based on how he started and came up through the company, he learned every aspect of that business. And he is so much better equipped to understand, have empathy toward his customers, have empathy toward his own employees in the company and what they have to deal with. And he's able to serve so much better. Another family member that I touched on briefly is my sister, Jane. Now, Jane passed away many, many years ago, but I remember, and she was 9 years older than me, so I got to see her in action as an adult. And she went to college for occupational therapy. She was in school for 6 years studying this. She started her own business where she worked with a lot of children with muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, a lot of these very debilitating types of ailments that prohibited them from functioning. And so obviously when a human being is dealing with something like that, they need a lot of extra care, a lot of attention, a lot of work. Her patients would come to her home, and she designed and built this home to accommodate this. So it was like one of those upside down houses where the first floor was this giant rec room. And in this rec room was all of these therapy balls, mats, devices to help with stretching and just moving muscles and body movement, all obviously from the waist up, which is occupational therapy. Physical therapy is more the whole body. It was just remarkable to see how much she cared and she was devoted to working with these kids. And she did this business and became very well known for the work that she did out of her home. And her husband, my brother-in-law, Jeff, was a CPA, also worked out of the home. So it was just kind of cool. And this is like back in the 80s and long, long time ago. And before any of this remote work or work from home type stuff ever really got trendy. And then my last little family story is my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, Debbie, which is Paul's mom. And she is a hoot. She has the most creative, I think I'm creative. Oh my God. This woman, I tell you what, I was talking to her about this one particular, I don't want to call it a straight out business. It was more like a pseudo business. She was doing a craft where she would make these bracelets that were kind of big and bulky, kind of like costume jewelry, but they were all custom made with all kind of really cool antique vintage jewelry or heirlooms or things like that. and ribbon, and they were more like a cuff type of, I wish I had one to show you on the video portion of the show, but I don't, sorry. And what was really interesting when I talked to her about it, because I didn't know all the end-to-end details about how she started. She was telling me that she grew up in a culture that was all about reduce, reuse, recycle. This just became part of her DNA, where she would be very crafty. She would find multiple purposes for things around the house. She would find an old chair and she'd reupholster it and she'd sell it or whatever. And there were all these different things that she would either do for charity or she'd do and have auction, and then she'd donate the money. She was very generous and always thinking about how can I help the needy and how can I also be creative and just be in that space of bringing something back to life that might have been discarded. And so when she did this, she even had a name for it. It was called Risty Business, which I thought was great. And I was so excited when I found out about what she was doing. And I'd be out with her, like I remember going through the bank drive-through and she was wearing one of her wristlets. And she was obviously, you could see it through the drive-through window, and the bank teller was just going nuts over like, oh my God, where did you get that and stuff? And that's how she ended up selling them or making them for people, was all through just wearing it and having women come up to her and comment. And she said it was always a great icebreaker. And so she started making these and had lots of opportunities to make them. She'd go buy all these supplies in bulk and everything. And I was frothing at the bit. I'm like, let me build you a website. Let me do this and let me do that. And this is before Etsy. This is like a long time ago. This was when I very first was even doing websites. I don't even know if I definitely hadn't started my business yet. I was so excited for her because I could see the business opportunity behind it. And it was just a crafty thing that she just loved and felt such compassion for the people who would give her their heirlooms, and she'd work it into the piece and everything. It was just really cool. But I asked her, well, how long did you do it for? And she said, I did it for like 3.5 years. But she said when my brother got ill, she stopped and she just ended up taking all of her wristlets and all of her stuff and donating it. And she sold, I think she said she sold, her last gig was at like this big kind of crafty flea market where she was able to get rid of like 250 or 300. So she had made quite an inventory, and it was to donate to the local food bank, which was something that she was always incredibly passionate about. That was the end of Risty Business. But I just thought it was so cool that no matter what it is, whether you're coming into a business that is a family business, like my nephew Paul did, or if you're leaving a company and starting your own business, like my dad did, or if you're just fulfilling a passion for work that you want to do and you want to help people, like my sister did, and my brother-in-law Jeff, through his work as a CPA, working from home, there's so many different opportunities and ways that you can start something, whether it's you want to stay a solopreneur or whether you want to build a legitimate, big, multi-facet business with employees and something you can have an exit strategy or sell at some point. Doesn't matter. Starting is so powerful. And so throughout this season, I'm going to be talking about the elements of starting, especially the mindset, the belief systems, the things that stop us, the things that get in the way, how our brain just kind of takes over instead of just being in action and making things happen. And so I'll be talking a lot about that. And I'll try to use some context around the prescriptive steps. Like I think one of the ideas I have is like starting a book. Well, how do you do that, right? I know a lot of people who have so much experience, so much knowledge, and so much spirit that they want to share to help others coming up behind them or to share their experience, and they just don't know how to deliver it. They don't know how to package it and deliver it. So that's one of the ideas that I have for an episode. Now, I've shared a little bit about my family. Well, let me tell you about some of the things I've started. So because I've had so much exposure to entrepreneurial people, things starting, I love new stuff. I love completing things as well. And I think that there have been a couple of instances where I've started things and just not been able to finish them for various reasons. But obviously, I've started this show and I'm going to keep going. So there you go. So one of the first things that I started when I was, as an adult, in the corporate world or just in the business world. I was working right out of art school for a type house. And I'm like, I want to do more than this, right? I want to be more creative. I don't want to just set type all the time, but you got to eat, right? So that was my bread and butter. That's how I earned a living when I first got out of art school. It was a great job in that I learned so much about typography and just the art and skill of it. Thank you, Vince, again, for teaching me how to do that. I left that company, small family-owned business, much to their surprise and disappointment, but we kissed and made up later because they saw how happy I was doing what I was doing. I started a little greeting card business, and I had this grand, very idealistic vision of what it would be like to be in business. Now remember, I'm an art student, right? So only been out in the world working for like 3-4 years. It's like, oh, running a business is easy, right? All I got to do is come up with a good product and I got to get out there and sell it, right? Jeez. Well, I've already shared the story about my Pappy Cards, which was the name of my product line and business. And I did it for about 3.5 years. Loved it, had a great time, but I just couldn't make any money at it. So that combined with Hallmark coming out with their gold crown stores just killed the industry. So the industry shifted and I didn't have the education or the understanding or the financial backing to keep it going. And it was one of those things where my product was obviously a commodity, greeting cards, hello. And the other thing is they sold for so little, like a card sold for 50 cents. It was always Keystone. If it sold in the store for $1, it would be 50 cents to me. And it was just, I couldn't make enough money to live because I couldn't sell enough product in order to do that because I was going door to door. And so that was a really good lesson. It just was the beginning of a foundation of really understanding how important sales is, how important your product is. Even though I don't have an MBA, I didn't go to business school, I have learned through trial and error. And that's the beauty behind starting, is the fear of failure will keep you from starting, guaranteed. It will also make starting really scary because you're worried about what people will think. You're worried about all kinds of things. That's where the fear is driving that. So I'm going to be talking a lot about that, how to do damage to that, how to move beyond that, and still make it a wonderful experience that you will learn from. I mean, how many times do you see on LinkedIn or hear stories in a podcast where one successful entrepreneur had become successful because they had all these, what you might label as failures, when they'd started other things and either sold them or didn't complete them or whatever. But look at what they've learned as an exercise of going through that, of learning the hard way, if you will. And that's what I'm trying to help you avoid, is learning the hard way. So that's why I want to tell these stories and share these things with you. So you can understand that, okay, I'm not the only one that's facing that kind of stuff. And you can be brave and courageous and go through that door and start it, whatever it is, whatever the project is, whether it's a business or something small. What's interesting about what I learned in coming up and starting my businesses is that it's okay to not finish something or to, I don't want to say abandon, but you get to a point where, and this is what happened to me, that I was like, okay, I started to have some mounting debt for printing costs when I had my greeting card company, my little old solopreneurship, my very first solopreneur business. And to the point where I was trying to save money by hand coloring my cards. It was, oh my gosh, it was what I did to save money. And I just wasn't able to make the kind of money that I needed to survive. So I shuttered that business. My dad helped me pay off my credit card that I had run up paying for all this printing. But the cool thing was not only what I learned, but I also won an award for some of my cards, which was kind of cool. And some amazing stories came through from the retailers that were selling the cards, of customers that picked them out and said, I've never found a card that fit this really unusual situation more than this one. And those stories came back to me. It was so affirming that what I did, even if it was just 1 or 2 people that had a positive takeaway from something I created, that was like a drug for me. And I tap that drug every time I create something, whether it's an episode like this, or whether it's a full business, a project I'm doing for a client, a book I'm writing, whatever it is, a greeting to someone in the grocery store. I always want to be that person who makes someone feel better in that moment, that day. And that's a big driver for pretty much everything I do. I'm not going to drag you through all the businesses that I've started, but one of the things that I did want to share was, because I am so creative, I mean, my mind is constantly coming up with ideas, and thank goodness I've got clients that keep that mouth fed, if you will, because I'm constantly coming up with amazing ideas. Some of them are not so amazing, but it's constantly working. It's like always working in the background. It's just how my brain is. And I'm always thinking, oh, I could do this. One of the things that, and this really speaks to not starting, right? And I'll be talking about this as well. It's okay to not start. When you go through a process of where something doesn't necessarily fit, or it requires way too much capital or time, or something that you're just not able to devote to it, then what you do is say, you know what, let's table this. Maybe I can give someone else the idea. Maybe I can just not do it. I remember I had set up on my website my paintings. So I do oil paintings on canvas. Love it. I love painting water, sky, anything like Florida. It just makes me happy. And I love to paint. But anyway, I'm like, oh, why don't I, everybody's asking me, oh, do you sell your stuff? I'm like, well, yeah. So I set up a store online. And because I didn't really spend a lot of time marketing, it wasn't really the primary thing for me. My solopreneur business as a creative consultant strategist is my bread and butter, basically, and what I really love to do, even though I enjoy painting. One of the things I was thinking about doing was starting to take the artwork and maybe doing some sayings and doing drop shipping, like on mugs, or have little pictures or whatever, all that junk that we don't need, if you will, for our offices and homes and stuff. And I thought, oh, everybody's doing this drop shipping. Yeah, it's going to be great. And I did a lot of research into it. And it was like, as far as setting it up and doing the artwork for it, that was not going to be a problem. Where the problem was inherent in the actual business model. And it has a lot of flaws. As attractive as they make it seem, that drop shipping is a great way to make money, and it does require a lot. So I'm not going to go into the whole drop shipping conversation, but I was really struggling with setting it up because I knew it was going to take a lot of time, a lot of investment in effort and building everything and doing the designs. And then, of course, I was going to have to market. And as you know, or may not know, I am not a great promotional person for my own stuff. I don't like marketing my own stuff. I just love helping and doing the work and the creative process. And so that's why you won't see or hear a lot of, hey, buy my stuff when I present or create content. It's all about giving and helping and inspiring and just having fun talking about what I do. So I reached a point where I was like, okay, Terry, just let it go. Don't go down that rabbit hole. Don't build that whole drop shipping mechanism, because it's going to make you do something you don't really like to do or want to do or have the experience and talent to do, which is marketing all the crap that I would be selling. And so I chose not to do it. And let me tell you what, I want to say, like, dude, let me tell you what, I was so relieved. I felt so good making that decision not to move forward with the drop shipping component of my artwork online. Oh my God, I just thinking about it is just like, talk about a burden taken off my shoulders. But this is something that I've really learned about myself and my personality. And that is, I love the idea of creating, of coming up with a project, of building it, of making it super professional, test it, making it work, all the functionality. That's why I love working on websites so much. And, or writing a book or doing this podcast, the whole production of it. I love that. It's like, it just is my jam. But when it comes to, okay, now that that's done, now I have to go out there and sell it. Well, sales, I love sales because for me, it's all about helping, right? Understanding, building relationships and helping, being of service. But it's that in-between component of marketing, of hawking stuff that just has such a high ick factor for me. Part of it's because I'm a projector in human design, but that's with my human design people. But anyway, so that's just kind of the long and short of what I wanted to kick this season off with, which is this is the experience, what I was exposed to as far as who started things in my family, how did businesses get started by family members, what I was exposed to, how I've been functioning as a project starter in my life. And it doesn't have to all be business related. It can be very personal. It can be doing something in your home. It can be starting a relationship. It can be starting an exercise routine. It doesn't matter. It's the act of starting, because there's a click in your brain where a decision is made and you move forward with something because you want to get on the other side of it. You want to have the experience of it, just like me, loving projects, building something. And then there's also the part of completing. And who are you on the end of the completion cycle? Who are you during it? Who are you before you start it? So starting is just an important part of our journey that a lot of people really just don't talk about. And so that's why I wanted to make season 2 of My Solopreneur Life about starting. All right, so I kicked us off, and I want to end this episode with a prompt. So my prompt in the teaser, which was the episode prior to this, was about make a list of things you've started. What's the status? And then the third column, if you finished it, how do you feel about it after you finish it? Because I talked a lot about my family, the prompt I have for you for this episode is who in your life has started something? What did they start? Why did they start? Interview them. Ask them, why did you start this thing? And what did you learn? And what were some of the things that you experienced? I would like for you to interview people in your family, friends, people you know, people you've worked with, maybe clients, who started their business, started a big project, even if it was an author who started a book. And there are so many people, I guarantee, in your life that have gone through this process of starting something and have grown from it. And interview them, ask them, tell me about why you started, what you did, what that experience was like. And if you had, this is the other part, this is part B of the prompt, which is about recognizing what did they learn and what advice would they give to someone starting something now that they'd been through that. So it's first understanding like what was involved in starting, what made you start, what was the impetus for beginning that business or beginning that project, what did you learn, and then what advice would you give. Just interview 1 or 2 people just through a conversation. You don't need to do a book report on it, and just hear what people think, because I'm telling you what, these people who have started things and completed them or started them and dropped them, they have some really interesting pearls of wisdom to share with you, because how many people have really asked them why they started what they started? I'd like for you to do that and share some feedback about that. Thanks for being here, and I will see you in the next show. Well, I know you're disappointed, but that's it for this episode. Listen, the great news is there's another one coming, so stay tuned. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you do the prompt. If this episode had a prompt, and you get that homework done, because you're going to be a better solopreneur. How's that for a maternal finger shaking at you? Hey, listen, thanks so much for being here, for giving me time of your day, and, for taking it on. So if you want to learn more and stay connected with me, just head on over to mysolopreneurlife.com. Thanks a bunch. See you soon. That was pretty good. I think I'll keep that one.